Hey people, how are you? It's Makeda Valletta, reporting live from Chicago, chilly. Only in Chicago would I have on a freaking hoodie right now, which is annoying as fuck, because the weather keeps changing. And when I moved here, people told me Chicago weather was bipolar, and I thought they were maybe exaggerating, but they're right, because it goes from hot to chilly and it drives me fucking insane. So excuse my little hoodie in the summertime, because even though it's September 1st, it's still summer. So anyhow, today I wanted to speak about a topic that is dear to my heart. It's something that I speak about a lot, but a lot of people misunderstand. And so just to tell you a little bit about me, a lot of people ask me where I'm from. I was born and raised in New York City, but I'm Afro American. My dad's family is from St. Augustine, Florida, which is the oldest town in America. A lot of people don't know that. And my mother is from Western Pennsylvania, a small town about 30 minutes outside of Pittsburgh, close to Ohio. And her dad was from Pensacola, Florida. So I have a lot of Florida roots. But I grew up in New York City in Harlem. And Harlem is a traditionally Afro-American neighborhood, which a lot of you know, but New York City is an international city. I feel like the amount of Americans in New York is actually very small. As an American in New York, you feel like a minority. I remember growing up, I used to think, where are all the black Americans? Like, I felt like, most of the black people in New York are from the Caribbean and they're from Africa. And so many times growing up when I would go to the West Indian Day Parade, which happens actually on Labor Day, on Monday. It's one of the biggest parades in New York. And I grew up going there. My dad would take me. And as an adult, people would ask me, I would go to the parade, but I didn't have a flag. And so they'd be like, oh, where are you from? And I tell them I'm from here, from the United States. And people would act like they didn't understand what I meant. Like, how could you not be from the Caribbean? And like they acted like they never heard of an Afro-American, which is really annoying. And then I've heard a lot of people say a lot of ignorant things as well. I've heard, I'm a serious student of dances of the African diaspora. I study Afro-Cuban stuff, Haitian, Afro-Puerto Rican, Afro-Dominican, Afro-Brazilian, Afro-Peruvian, Afro-Colombian, Congolese, and stuff from the Americas. And I have heard Afro-Cuban dance teachers say that Afro-Americans don't have any history or any legacy, or we don't know where we come from. I've heard Caribbean people and Africans say that. And it really annoys me. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Okay. I was just on, much respect to Amara La Negra, who a lot of you probably know who she is. She's an Afro-Dominican woman who's been speaking up a lot about the color issues in Latin America and Dominican Republic. Now, the neighborhood I grew up in New York was heavily Dominican. I'm from the border of Harlem, West Harlem, Washington Heights. If you don't know New York, Washington Heights is a heavily Dominican neighborhood. I read a statistic once that there's more Dominicans in my neighborhood than there are on the island of DR. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but I can definitely say that we're at least second highest off, besides the island. And so I grew up around Dominicans, and I grew up around Dominicans that look just like me and my family. Some of them look blacker and more African than me and my family. And I remember being a kid and being confused because I would see people all the time speaking Spanish that looked just like me and my family. And I'd be like, Dad, I thought that person was black. And he's like, they are black. They're black Dominican. Dominican is not a race, it's a nationality. You could be a white Dominican, you could be a black Dominican, you could be a Chinese Dominican, you could be an indigenous Dominican, just like with America. You could be a white American, a black American, Chinese American, Native American. America is a nation. It's not a race. Dominican Republic is a nation, right? Puerto Rico, same thing. Some Puerto Ricans have African blood, some of them don't. Some come from the Spaniards, some come from Africans, some come from the indigenous, some are a mixture, some have Chinese blood. No different than the United States, right? But for some reason, people have a hard time understanding that, and that includes other black people. Now, growing up in my neighborhood, I never had any bad experience with any Dominican person. Neither did my twin brother, neither did my mom. Like, we never had a problem with anyone. It's all good. But it was my dad. My dad was heavily involved in the civil rights movement. He was one of the founders of the first Afro American Studies Department in this country, standalone Afro American Studies Department at UMass Amherst. And he was a professor of Afro American Studies, even though he had no degree, because my dad was kicked out of college for being involved in the civil rights movement. My dad was a freshman in college when the sit-ins started. He went to Florida A&M. And being a Florida black person, my dad was militant, because one thing about Florida, which has a very different history than the rest of the South. Florida black people, I remember when I was 12 years old and my dad took me to his hometown, St. Augustine, and he told me, look, Florida black people were very different than the rest of the South. We were not some yes sir, yes ma'am black people. Actually, my dad doesn't even like people saying yes sir and yes ma'am. I have a nephew who said that to him once, and he was like, listen, don't say that shit up here, because to him, being from Florida, all that yes sir, yes ma'am shit is like some slave talk. So I didn't grow up talking like that. He didn't, it was like, no, right? So my dad told me, like, in Florida, if in his town, if a white person called them a nigger, they fought them, period. They didn't play that shit. It wasn't like the rest of the South. The women in my dad's family, my dad said that in his family, the rule was educate the women so they can stay out of the white woman's kitchen. So all the women in my dad's family were teachers and teachers and nurses. So someone said that your father was in SNCC. That's what's up. My uncle actually wrote the autobiography of Stokely Carmichael, and my dad wrote that afterward. And my dad knew Stokely as well. And my dad wasn't involved he wasn't a part of SNCC, because my dad was a part of the organization that the Black Panthers grew out of. He was a part of the organization that Assata Shakur was in. And they strategically put together the Black Panthers. And the Black Panthers did not start in Oakland like people think. It actually started in Lawrence County, Alabama, registering people to vote. And they had a pact within their group, and I always keep forgetting the name of the organization. But they said that no matter where they went, no matter where their comrades went in the country, they were to establish cells, and they were to look for brilliant young minds. And so one of his comrades got a job out in Oakland, and that's when he recruited Huey P. and the whole Oakland chapter. But the Panthers didn't start in Oakland. Now, so my dad, being from Florida, he was militant, and that's why he left the South at like 19 years old and didn't go back down there for like 30 years, because he thought he was either going to kill someone or get killed, right? And so, but then as an older man, my dad is now 76, as an older man, he is wiser than that and realizes that the nonviolent movement was where it was really at. But that's a whole other discussion. And Stokely is your god uncle. That's interesting. Your family might know my family. My dad was with Stokely right before he died, and he did know him well. My dad also knew Malcolm. Malcolm was assassinated 5 blocks away from where I grew up, in Harlem. And my dad was actually there the day it happened. He got there after it happened. He told me he would have jumped in front of a gun for Malcolm. He had been to over 100 of his speeches. So I grew up around black intellectuals and freedom fighters. So let me just say that, okay? My uncle who wrote, a lot of people don't know that Stokely Carmichael is Trinidadian. Some people may or may not know that. And my uncle, who went to Howard with him, is Jamaican. So I come from black scholars and Pan-Africanists. I grew up with a black consciousness and a love for black people everywhere. But it's like the older I would get, just whatever. I've heard so many Caribbeans and Africans say condescending things about Afro Americans and things that are incorrect, and it pisses me off. So, for example, going back to Amada La Negra's page, I was on her page. Yeah, that is very interesting. So I was on Amada's page, and there's a Dominican dude who wrote a comment saying something about Dominicans have more African traditions than Afro Americans, and I see a lot of people just making reference, black people of the world making reference to Afro Americans as if, Afro Americans don't have a lot of African traditions. Afro Americans are disconnected. They want to use us as an example of people who are lost. And that is absolutely fucking ridiculous, because honestly, I love my people everywhere, but Afro Americans have been the leaders of the black world. We've been the leaders of the Black is Beautiful movement. We've been the leaders of the natural hair movement. I don't care what anybody says, you'll find more black women with natural hair in the United States, any American city. I don't care if you go to New York, Detroit, Atlanta, whatever damn city you want to name. You have black women all around. Yes, you also have a lot of black women here that have wigs and weaves, but this is a natural hair mecca, right? So we are the ones, and so when you see Amara La Negra, you can tell instantly that she was inspired by Afro Americans, because her look is like 1960s Afro American look. And Dominican Republic, because going back to me growing up around them, I never had an issue with them. But it was my dad, who brought it to my attention how racist Latin America is. Extremely racist, to the point that so many people are just now discovering that there are even black people in Latin America. Like, a lot of people are surprised to know, oh wait, there's black people in Peru. There's black people in Colombia. There's black people in Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, and Cuba, and they don't understand how black those countries are. A lot of people... so when Amara La Negra steps out with her afro and her dark skin and she says she's Dominican, people are all like, what? Dominican? Because they act like they don't know, or they don't know that there are black people in those countries. And Amara La Negra herself said that she was inspired by reading the autobiographies of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Again, Afro-Americans, right? Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey's from Jamaica, an island full of black people. A place that is way blacker than the United States. And actually, in the slave trade, the smallest percentage of Africans are brought to the U.S. So a lot of places are blacker than the United States. A lot of the Caribbean islands, South American countries, whether it be Brazil, Colombia, all have way more black people than the U.S. And so, but everybody knows that we exist. We're a small percentage in this big island, this big land, but everybody knows about us. But how come people don't know there's black people in Colombia and there's black people in all these other places? Now, so when I saw this guy make this comment, it was like really annoying to me, because I just feel like there's a lot of black people in America right now, whether they be from the Caribbean, whether they be from South America or Africa. The reason why they're even allowed to be here is because of the fight of Afro Americans who fought to change laws. My dad told me about these laws. I forget what they're called, but there were some laws that where the U.S. was trying to make this country whiter, and so they were promoting immigration of Europeans, and they were trying to deny black people from the world. And it's Afro Americans that fought to change that, which then allowed Caribbeans and Africans to easily immigrate to this country. And so now, like, every city you go to, I remember when I was growing up, New York was unique in the sense that we had a lot of Africans and Caribbeans. Now it's no big deal, because every city I go to, whether it be Houston, Chicago, Detroit, Baltimore, D.C., they all have a bunch of Africans and Caribbeans. I mean, it's everywhere, right? And that, which is cool, but I don't like the fact that you have people coming here who are not learning the history. They don't give thanks to us. They come with animosity. And they're looking at us as if, oh, Afro-Americans are just lazy, we're this or we're that. They don't know anything about our legacy. Afro-Americans have a lot to be proud of. And yes, we do have the biggest influence. Everybody copies us. People can say what they want, but everybody copies our style. Even, in the building that I grew up in, it's a landmark building in Harlem. And you could even Google it, 555 Edgecombe Avenue. Paul Robeson lived in the apartment that I grew up in. Cassandra Wilson lived there when I was a kid. Andy Kirk, Duke Ellington lived around the corner. So I'm from Sugar Hill. And it was all prominent Afro-Americans. And right above where my parents lived, there's a famous Ethiopian artist. He's very famous in Ethiopia and around the world. And he says, he just says, no matter what Africans say, he said they love black Americans. They like worship black Americans. And he doesn't understand like how some people can come here and talk shit, because that's not the case. Like most of, Africans, whatever, they want to be like us. And so I don't understand. It's like people have a chip on their shoulder or some type of inferiority complex. The same thing I feel like is true with being from New York. I'm from New York, and there's a lot of people who love to hate on New York, when New York is a dope ass city, and without New York we wouldn't have hip hop and so much other dope shit. And New York has created too many dope things, and too many talented people have come from New York that that New York has nothing else to prove. Like, we don't have anything. Why is that crusty dude all over my camera? Anyhow, New York doesn't have anything else to prove. New York is obviously a dope-ass city. And we have the fucking longest list ever of talented people. And across the board, whether it be actors, comedians, rappers, hip-hop, the whole hip-hop culture, which is the biggest thing ever, birthed in New York. So obviously New York has to be dope. And when people say New Yorkers don't talk to people, how could we be so creative if we didn't talk, you know what I'm saying, to each other? So all that's some bullshit. New York is dope. And Afro Americans, we have been the leaders of the black world. And we've contributed so much. And it's completely untrue that we don't have African traditions here. We do, you know what I'm saying? And there's a book, I'm going to post it on my Instagram page. I don't have it with me right now because I'm outside. But there's a book actually written by Katrina Hazard on Hoodoo. And it goes into depth about the different parts of the South, how the different cultures, how cultures were different in different parts of the South. Like whether you were on the East Coast, like whether you were like in Maryland and in Virginia, or whether you were in the Carolinas, or whether you were in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. There was different cultures in the South. And the plantations and everything, there was, in terms of what was retained, but there were a lot of African traditions in Afro-American culture. So that's not true. So a lot of people don't do their research. Another thing I have to say is that, I've had a lot of African friends and been in relationships with Africans, and much love to them, but I have known a lot of Africans who told me, like even when they weren't like this, they've told me that their family didn't like black Americans, and I had an ex who was, one parent was Nigerian and the other parent was Afro-American. He told me his dad always talked shit about black Americans, even though his mom was black American. And so that type of thing I don't understand. I can't see an Afro-American moving to Africa and talking about how much they hate Africans. I just don't see us doing that. If anything, Afro-Americans have always reached back to Africa. Afro-Americans have raised money for Africa. Afro-Americans have built schools in Africa, like Oprah. Oprah could have built a school in Chicago. Chicago could have used that, but she did it for Africa, right? My dad has a friend who was one of the attorneys who was actually involved in ending apartheid. There were a group of Afro-American attorneys who went over to South Africa for that. And so Afro-Americans have always been reaching back to Africa. We've written scholarly texts and books on Africa. We've done documentaries in Africa. But see if you can find one African scholar who has studied us and has written books about us and has done documentaries on us. You won't find it. Like, I promise you that. And I'll bet any of you money because I've grown up around black scholars and I know what's out there and it's not. And there are African families who became rich off the slave trade. I knew a girl in D.C. who, she didn't tell me this because I probably would have cursed her out, but she said to my friend, she told my friend that her family was rich and had money because they got rich off the slave trade. Now, if an African chick ever said that shit to me, I'd be like, okay, so what are you doing? You're telling me that. Are you giving money to any organizations? How about you give me some money, goddammit? Because you're over here right now using our resources, and my family fought for that shit. Like, I actually come from fighters. I come from people who actually did that work. I come from people who helped all of us to be free, so I take that shit personal. And the people who, it's like I've never seen one example of Africans building a school over here, because the same way Africans can say, oh, we don't all live in huts, we're not all living in huts and poor. Yeah, okay, that's true, but all of us aren't rich. All of us are not rich. Sorry. All of us are not rich. People act like because you're American, like money just grows on trees. Every time I leave the country, people think that because I'm American, I just have endless money, and that's fucking annoying, because it's like, can somebody tell them that some Americans do live in huts? Some Americans, a lot of us, if we don't pay our bills every month, we won't have anywhere to live, and there's a huge homeless problem. It's easy to lose your housing. So the same way, Africans and people like that want us to know that they don't all live in huts, and not all poor, and yada, yada, yada. A lot of them have money. Well, a lot of us don't. So have I ever seen a group of Africans come over here and say, you know what, we're going to give free medical care to poor Afro-Americans who can't afford it? Or we're going to build a school in an underserved Afro-American community? No. No. Not one example of it. And so I'm just saying that as Afro Americans, we have a lot to be proud of. And I get offended when I see black people who actually choose to live in this country. And the whole reason why they're even allowed to live in this country is because of the fight that we fought and people that I descend from. And then you have the nerve to talk shit and not learn the history and be grateful. That is highly offensive. So that's just something I had to say. And I've felt like this for a while. And people misunderstand me a lot because every time I stand up for my people, just people get offended. Like the Dominican dude who wrote the comment on Amado La Negra's page about how Afro Americans, Dominicans have more African traditions. And it's like, first of all, don't you dare compare Dominicans to Afro Americans. Because like I said, never had a problem with them, but they have some serious problems. And it's not evident from being around Dominicans. Like, if you're just around them, they're cool. Like, you visit the DR. I have no desire to spend $1 visiting the Dominican Republic at all because I don't like their ignorance. I don't like the way they treat Haitians. And every black person I know that speaks Spanish will tell you how racist Dominicans are. Like, the ones who speak Spanish, who Dominicans don't know they speak Spanish. Because, especially black Panamanians. I know black Panamanians, when they speak English, they usually sound like West Indians, or they sound like black Americans. So people don't think that they speak Spanish when they hear them speak English. Every black Panamanian I know talks about how racist Dominicans are because they say the racist shit in front of them because they don't think they understand. But growing up in my neighborhood, I never had a problem with any Dominican. Like, I've never, when I go into Dominican businesses, nobody's treating me funny, it's no issue. So it's not an evident thing. So a lot of people, when they travel to the Dominican Republic, they don't see it because they don't know what's up. They don't really know. But 15 years ago, I knew like at least 4 Afro Americans who went to DR and got snatched up, kidnapped, threatened because they had locks in their hair and they didn't speak Spanish. And they said, if you go to DR and you don't speak Spanish, people think that you're Haitian and they can't stand Haitians. And I've spent a lot of time around Haitians. I love Haitian people. Haitian people are some of the most intelligent, friendliest people I've been around. And I have never heard a Haitian person say anything negative about a Dominican. I've actually heard Haitians say more negative things about Americans than I have about Dominicans. And Dominican Republic is really fucked up to them. So I can't, if I was Haitian, like I'm American, I don't want to go to DR and spend $1. If I was Haitian, I really wouldn't fuck with them. You know what I'm saying? But Haitian people are very sweet people. Love them. Sometimes they may be too nice to a fault. Because I've never heard a Haitian say anything negative about a Dominican, but I've heard Dominicans say negative things about Haitians constantly. And they have this whole anti-Haitian thing going on over there. And then you have all these Dominicans that are brainwashed to fucking death where they'll try to say like, merengue is not African. And then like, it's just like a recent movement of them having some type of awareness of who they are. And it's really because of the rest of the black world, starting with Afro Americans who were shaming them. And so Amado La Negra was inspired by us. She wasn't inspired by Dominicans because what Dominican do you see standing up being black and proud? Instead, you see people like Zoe Saldana, who I can't stand her because she's an idiot. She thought it was okay to put on prosthetics and blackface to play Nina Simone, because in Latin America, if you look at it, Colombia, Puerto Rico, they're still doing blackface. They're like 50 years behind. That shit is not cool over here. Why? Because Afro Americans fought to end that shit. So don't tell. In Brazil, there's a lot of black people who idolize Brazil. Black people in Brazil have no rights. There was never a civil rights movement, any kind of movement in Brazil. Brazil is super racist. And an old president of Brazil had once said, I can't remember when this was, but my dad told me this. He said that if a black person in Brazil even complains about racism, they could be sued and sent to jail. So you don't even see blacks in Brazil even complaining. So again, Afro Americans, even though we are such a minority in this land, we own more in America than Africans own in Africa, okay? So blacks in America have a lot to be proud of. And more people need to learn that history. And somebody just said to me, Brazil's killing blacks, but Brazil is super dangerous. I have no fucking desire to go to Brazil neither because I love my life too much. I like safety. But the other thing I was going to say was that, somebody on here said that they have a friend who's fluent in Spanish who works in the Bronx and he knows about the racism. And that's what I'm saying. Every black person who speaks Spanish, who people don't think you speak Spanish, they know about Dominicans and the fucked up shit they say, you know, and so they have some serious problems. So I definitely don't want to hear any Dominican trying to tell me that they have more black any more black consciousness than a goddamn black American. That's some bullshit. Because you know what? Why did Marcus Garvey come to Harlem? Marcus Garvey was in black ass Jamaica. Jamaica is like, you might as well be in Africa when you're in Jamaica. It is so black. I feel like I'm in Ghana. You know, it's way blacker than here. How come he didn't go to Brazil? You know what I'm saying? How come he didn't go a lot of places? Why did he come all the way up to Harlem? He didn't even stop in Miami. Castro came to Harlem. Nelson Mandela came to Harlem. When I was a kid and Mandela got out of jail, my parents took me to see him. They all come to Harlem. And one thing that my dad is so much better at quoting these things. His mind is like, he has photographic memory, but he's the truth. But my dad told me in Marcus Garvey's biography, he said that there are people in the Caribbean that will try to tell you that there are something like, there are people in the Caribbean that will try to tell you there's like, you know, progressive black people who are better than the American Negro, but I'm here to tell you that that is not so. It was something along those lines. Like he was saying that Afro Americans were the creme of the crop, and that is why he decided to come to Harlem. Okay, he took his whole movement here. Somebody else in here said they went to Brazil in 2012 and it wasn't a pleasant place. Yeah, I don't have a desire to go there. I loved Cuba because, first of all, I don't want to be scared for my life. I also didn't like being in Jamaica, but loved Haiti, but especially loved Cuba because the infrastructure was more together and it's a little bit easier to be. But Cubans are highly intelligent people, and you get in a conversation with them, very intelligent, but Cuba's also very safe. Colombia has gotten safer. Colombia used to be super dangerous, as we all know, but it's much safer now, and I love Colombia. But I don't want to go anywhere where I have to be like, you know, scared for my life. And so yeah, so I'm gonna save this video. Hopefully I'll be able to repost it onto Facebook. And I just wanted to explain that because a lot of people don't understand where I'm coming from, and then they'll be trying to call me dumb and say I don't know what I'm talking about, when really they're the dumb ones, and they need to read some books. They need to be thankful. And I take it personally because I come from a freedom fighting family who, if they didn't fight, then a lot of black people in the black world wouldn't even be allowed to be here. Okay, so if you're going to choose to make America your home and you're from someplace else, please take the time out to learn the history. It's the respectful thing to do. That's all I want to say. Have a good day, people. Bye.